Welcome to the Medical Device Made Easy podcast. Here is Munir Al from easymedicaldevice.com. And today we'll I just said try to help you to avoid clinical investigation. And for those that don't know why, mainly we'll explain to you also why people are trying to avoid clinical investigation. So for that, I have with me Hatem Rabeh. So Hatem, welcome to the Medical Device Made Easy podcast.
Hi, Munir. Happy to be with you today.
Great. So thank you, Atem, for being here. I see a lot of your contents also on LinkedIn talking about clinical investigation and clinical evaluation mainly. So it's why it's really interesting to come and discuss about that now. But yeah, for people that don't know you, because I know you, but they maybe don't know you. So can you tell us more about you?
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Hatem. I'm a clinical evaluation consultant and clinical evaluation navigator. So I'm a medical doctor, and I have a Master of Science in Medical Engineering. And since 2017, I've been working as a clinical evaluation expert on medical devices from class 1 to class 3.
Great. So, Atem, as we will talk about clinical investigation, maybe before, because we have also some people that are coming to the channel not knowing all the aspects, so there are some confusion sometimes. So, before we go through clinical investigation, can we just make a reminder before of what is a clinical evaluation? Because maybe this is what is written also on the EUMDR. So, if we can just make this summary and then go deeply more on clinical investigation just after.
Yes. So to understand the concept of clinical evaluation, we may go back just to a brief review of the MDD. So clinical evaluation have been also required to be conducted under MDD. And from the MedDev 2.7-1, Rev 3, and then the Rev 4 was published in 2016. And this MedDev have established the basis of the clinical evaluations. So what is clinical evaluations? Clinical evaluation is a continuous process. It has been defined under the MDR in Article 2 as a systematic and planned process to continuously generate, collect, analyze, and assess clinical data pertaining to a device. The purpose is to prove the safety and efficiency of medical device, including its clinical benefits, when used as intended by the manufacturer. So what does it mean? This is the definition. You can find it in the Article 2 under the MDR. So the most important thing about the clinical evaluation to understand the concept is that the clinical evaluation is a systematic and planned process. So we cannot create a clinical evaluation report and just full stop. You have to have a clinical evaluation process have been conducted under your quality management system, which will be continued and then help you to generate, collect, analyze, and assess your data to prove the safety of your medical device. The three key characteristics to understand the concept of clinical evaluation is the aspect of continuous process, systematic and planned. So we have to plan a clinical evaluation report. We cannot just conduct a clinical evaluation report without any planning, and just like you create a report and that's it. And then you have to have clear objectives that have been already planned and verified, and the characteristic of acceptance have been also created in the clinical evaluation plan. To understand more the clinical evaluation as a process, as I told you, the MedDev 2.7-1 Rev 4, we currently use it. I hope we will have an MDCG that help us to get all the information, because there is an MDCG which pinpoints some parts of the MedDev that we are not able to use anymore. But in the MedDev, there is 5 stages of the clinical evaluation to conduct. The first one is the planning, as I explained. The stage, what we call in the MedDev, the stage 0, and the stage 1 is the identification of the pertinent data. And then there is the appraisal of data, and stage 3 is the analysis, and the stage 4 is the creating of the report. As we explained, if you gonna remember one thing about clinical evaluation is the clinical evaluation is not the report, it's a process that have been and that must be created for your medical device to continuously collect clinical data to prove and to assess the safety and performance of your medical device.
Okay. So
So,
this
yeah,
is really important here because as we said, so we talk a lot about clinical evaluation, and for me, what I when I'm explaining that, I say, yeah, it's really a document that is proving to everybody that your product is safe. So there is safety really important and efficiency or performance, meaning that what you are claiming that your device can do is really existing, is really approved through that. So when we are going through that now, where is clinical investigation on all this? Because if I have the clinical evaluation, then it's fine. So why do we talk about clinical investigation in that case? Just to avoid, as I said, the confusion between both here.
Unearth the pulse of the medtech world with MedTech Conf, a dynamic platform featuring global events on medical devices, biologicals, IVD, and pharmaceuticals. Stay informed, stay ahead, connect, share, and elevate your knowledge. Become an official sponsor. Make your event shine on the map. MedTech Conf, your key to the medtech universe. Remember, the future is now, and it's at your fingertips with MedTech Conf.
yes. So the clinical investigation can be the input of clinical evaluation. So we can use clinical investigation and clinical data from clinical investigation to create our clinical evaluation report and to establish the process of clinical evaluation. For that, we have to understand what is clinical investigations. So clinical investigation is the conduct when you conduct a clinical trial in the hospitals. So to make it easy to understand, when we conduct a clinical trial in the hospital on human, one or more, that's what we call clinical investigation. It's almost equal to clinical trial and to clinical study. It's the same per the ISO 14155 is exactly the same. It's the synonym of clinical trial and clinical study. So the question now is, okay, I'm a medical device startup because almost a big part of our clients and the medical device the medical device industry are startups. So if I'm a CEO of a medical device startup, I'm creating my medical device. When and how I have to look for clinical investigation and clinical evaluation. Should I do clinical investigation? Should I do clinical evaluations? I don't know. So I will give you some example. And so if you are if you are a CEO of a medical device, this is for you. So first thing to do to understand the importance of the clinical strategy, the market access. You cannot create a medical device without knowing the needs of your market. Because what I saw, I have almost 10 years in the field, and when I saw a startup creating a medical device, especially if they have been developed in a lab, so university lab, there is a medical device, there is an innovation, but there is not a market need.
Okay.
So yeah, the need of the medical device is not 100%. What we call it's nice to have, not must have. So if you are a CEO of a medical device, before asking the question about clinical investigation, you have to know if your device is nice to have or must have. I advise you to have always a device that must have. So for that, you cannot create a medical device without a strategy. And what is the strategy? Because we're gonna go back then to the clinical investigations. That's just I'd like to explain the process of creating a medical device and the corners, the importance of the clinical strategy and the needs of clinical investigations in your whole strategy. So the first thing to do if you have a medical device, before really creating what we called the prototype. So you have to understand your market need. And why you have to understand your market need? Because when you're gonna do your clinical evaluations, there is some question you have to answer. So what I advise my client to do when they come to me at the beginning of the development of their device is to create what we call the state of the art.
Okay.
And I called it enhanced state of the art, because the state of the art, it's required under MDR, but we should do it in the first parts of development. But a lot of startups do it at the last part when they are in the validation phase. As you know, a medical device, there is prototype, then in the development of a medical device, there is the development, verification, and validation. And a lot of people and the client come to me at the last validation phase to create their clinical evaluation and ask me the question, do I need a clinical investigation?
Yeah.
Let's go back. What if a CEO of a medical device startup come to me at the early phase? I will advise you to do a state of the art and what I call an enhanced state of the art. This report, it's a report, it's not a process. It's not like clinical evaluations. It's a report, the first one, but I will explain when we should update the state of the art, which will be included in clinical evaluation process. But I'm talking about the first report that you will be conducting under at the first stage of your medical device development. I called it the enhanced state of the art. Why? Because it will be used for the clinical evaluation. It will be used also for the risk analysis. It will be used for the usability. But what I add to the state of the art that I created, the first one, the market need, I added. I do a search for the market need and to see and to understand if it's really needed to have a medical device and where is the position of that medical device in the medical field. And if there is competitor, I will give also the development team the position of the competitor, what is accepted, what is not accepted. I mean clinically, which is required under MDR, and also which is in the marketing side, and also in the business side. So to go back to our main subject, which is clinical investigation, if you have a state-of-the-art that give answer and inputs to the clinical strategy, to the market access strategy, to your marketing strategy, and to your quality management system strategy, regulatory strategy, you will be able to provide an information that is backed by a scientific approach to have a real and clear roadmap for your medical device. Why? To answer the question of do I have to conduct a clinical investigations, if we're gonna do the theoretical aspects, we have always to conduct a clinical evaluation. Why? Because okay, sorry. Okay, so why? Because when you conduct a clinical evaluation, the answer is my clinical data is sufficient or not? If it's not sufficient, the majority of cases, we have to conduct clinical investigation. If it's sufficient, we don't have to conduct clinical investigation. But we cannot know this information if we do not have a state of the art, which is conducted at the beginning.
So here you advise mainly to make a research
exactly.
Before to really see what is available already as data. And when we have those information, then you can answer the question, is it sufficient so that I can go only to clinical evaluation only, or should I need a clinical investigation before to go to clinical evaluation? So this is mainly your strategy, if I can say. You do a kind of a warm-up before, and then you do the real work afterwards.
Exactly, yes. What is required by the MDR is to do clinical evaluation, to answer really the question, do clinical evaluation, process, report, and then you have sufficient and you don't have. But this process in practice, and after years of experience, it will take a lot of time and a lot of money. So you are a CEO of startup, do your state of the art, you will have your regulatory strategy, your clinical strategy, your market access strategy, and then the clinical expert that you are working with his experience, he must be experienced, he will read the state of the art, or if he conduct the state of the art, he will tell you, even without doing clinical evaluation, okay, we have to collect those data, or we have already the sufficient data and we can create our clinical evaluation without clinical investigations. And yeah,
So here, as you said, we have sufficient data. What is sufficient?
Yes.
It's also this thing. So, can I take the risk and say, I think it's sufficient, let's go through that and maybe reserve a no-go from the notified body, say, no, it's not sufficient? Or should I think, oh, it's sufficient, but let's add more by doing also this thing? I mean, where can I find the balance and say it's enough now, what
Yeah.
I'm collecting?
This is a big question. And the big answer, it depends. But no, I will not answer it depends. I will say in the MDCG 2023-7, there was explanation when the clinical evaluation, what is the definition of sufficient. But in one word, always your state of the art, if it's conducted well, and when there is the acceptance criteria for your performance and safety have been defined in the state of the art for one, the medical background. So what I mean, you will look, for example, I have a medical device creating or doing navigation in spine.
Mm-hmm.
So a navigation platform for spine surgery. What is sufficient clinical data for me? One first thing to do is to go back to the literature, so state of the art, to see for a medical doctor, what is the criteria of success operation for him? Okay, I know. Now, for example, I have this criteria that the medical doctor will use to say that, okay, for me, this surgery is a success. Then I will go back to the similar devices and see what are the criteria they created to say that their medical device that the surgery using their medical device is a success. And I have those criteria. I merge them, and here when the expertise come in, I merge them and I say, okay, now this is the interval for me where the medical device should be in terms of criteria and acceptance criteria. And to know that they are sufficient, and what is the definition of sufficient clinical data is to see how the similar devices or conducted their clinical data. They did, for example, a cadaveric study, they did a medical study, and what are the statistical significance of their parameter. And this, when I prove this information, I'm similar to the medical devices or best, or I'm similar also, when I attend this performance, my medical device, according to the state of the art and the literature, is acceptable in the medical background, so in the medical field. And this is how we define the sufficient information or sufficient clinical data.
So in terms of this, so here we are mainly doing some kind of literature search, state of the art, etc., trying to find what is in the data, if I can say, in the literatures and everything. So this is really to avoid to do some testing. I know that some people are also using, because we are still in this transition actually for UMDR, they are now trying to use also PMCF for doing those collection of data without being like a clinical investigation. So it's still doing collection of data. So is this something that you are also using or you advise your customers to use to collect data? If for example, you say, yeah, we have literatures, but maybe it's not sufficient, maybe because it's better to have data on your device than to have data on other devices. So is PMCF also a way to collect those data without going through clinical investigation again?
Yeah. To answer this question, we have just to answer one question, is to understand the paths of clinical evaluation, how we can prove that our medical device is safe and effective. I will not go into details, so average Joe in a medical device field can understand it. But there is some other details I will not go through. The three paths for clinical evaluation to prove the safety and performance is the equivalence path. So what does it mean? So my device is 100% equivalent, not 100%, but it's equivalent to another device already on the market. There is the MDCG 2020-5. that explain how to do the equivalence. This is the one. The second one is what we call Article 6110. So when the clinical data is not deemed, when the clinical data is deemed inappropriate. So when my medical device, I cannot, the creation of clinical data, it's not logical for example, for example, it's a surgical instrument that have been used, and like a scissor and
Like
other.
well-established technology, so it's technology that we are already knowing since many, many years.
Not the wet, but
Okay.
there is some condition for Article 61. We will not go into this field because it's a lot of detail. We will lose our audience.
Okay.
The third one is the clinical investigation path. So there's the three paths. When the PMCF have a lot of value, and what I saw from notified body, they really emphasize on the PMCF. So it's the post-market clinical follow-up when the path of equivalence have been chosen. If my clinical evaluation is based on the equivalence path, 80% of time, the notified body will ask about PMCF study, what we call PMCF study, to create and to have information and clinical data on your medical device after putting it on the market. So this is when really the PMCF. And also, if the clinical data, if there is some gaps on your clinical data when you conduct clinical investigation, and you should also have some other information, PMCF study will have a lot of information. The most important thing is to understand that PMCF study, it's not PMCF.
Yeah.
PMCF study, it's part of the PMCF. The post-market clinical follow-up, it's at 98% a must. So we should have proactive, what we call proactive post-market surveillance process. So, but when the PMCF study is the most valuable is when you have the equivalence path or clinical investigation. You used your clinical evaluation based on clinical investigation, but you have some gaps on it.
Okay. So this is mainly data that you are collecting on your device. So are we going through the same path that do the clinical investigation? As you said, for example, it's a PMCF study. So do we need to go to an hospital and do again testing, whatever, or we just collect data from the users that are using the device normally without asking any authorization or whatever?
Yeah. When we talk about PMCF study, it's a clinical study. What will be conducted after the CE marking. When we talk about PMCF, it includes a lot of things, including surveys, which are informations that will be collected from the user or patients. It depends. But the need of PMCF, it must be conducted from the clinical strategy, from the clinical evaluation plan, and really it depends on your medical device, your clinical data, and your state of the art. So the answer, it depends, but it's very important also to put in mind that not only the clinical investigation or the clinical data that you have now important, but also the planning for what you're gonna collect. Notified body, really they talk and they look for what you're gonna collect in the future, especially if you are a software medical devices. A lot of PMCF study or informations that will be asked from you from the notified body.
So now, is there any scenario where it's nearly impossible to avoid clinical investigation? Like, because I have some customer that comes to me also, and when we are talking about clinical investigation, they say, "Oh, can I avoid that?" So, is there any scenario where no, it's impossible to avoid that mainly? Hey, just a second. Do you need a EU, Swiss or UK representative? Then choose Easy Medical Device. We can represent you and also become your importer. Contact us at eo@easymedicaldevice.com.
Yes. Well, to answer this question, we have to answer the question about if we can, what are the what are the cases when an exemption from clinical investigation could be conducted. So you talked just a few minutes ago about well-established devices.
Yeah.
So if you are well-established devices and you have clinical data under MDD, and the clinical data are sufficient, you can use them and you choose the well-established device. There is an MDCG which really very good. I advise everyone to read it about this information. It's the MDCG 2023-7. So really easy to understand with a diagram that explain all. With the four cases that you can remember, it's easy. One, the wet. So if you are wet with clinical data that are sufficient. The second one, if you conducted a modification of a market device by the same manufacturer. What does it mean? If you have a medical device already on the market, CE market under MDR, and you did a modification, you have to, and the modifications are substantial, so you have to resend to the notified body, and you don't have clinical data on the new version of your medical device, but you have clinical data on the old version of your medical device. You have to prove the equivalence and use the clinical data for your first medical device that have been on the market under MDR. This is the second one. The third one is the legacy device, the legacy device from previous directives. And the fourth one is equivalent device from another manufacturer, but you have to have the contract with the equivalent device.
The famous one.
It's very important to underline that those cases, please, those cases are for implantable, to-be implantable device and class 3 device. Those cases, I repeat, very important, are not for all medical devices, but are for class 2B and class 3 devices. Why?
Implantables, only implantables, yeah.
Yes. Why? Because if you are class 1 or class 2A, as I explained, you can create your clinical evaluation based on equivalence path. So you don't have to do a clinical investigation or use Article 6110, or the third one, you have to do the clinical investigation.
So I suppose if you don't have this equivalency, if you don't have a previous device, if you don't have those data, etc., literature, etc., you have no other chance than to go through a clinical investigation, correct?
Yes, you have to do your clinical investigations. And to be honest, doing your clinical investigations when it needed, it's a plus for you also. I know it's time consuming and it's budget consuming.
Expensive,
yeah, but it will protect you as a manufacturer. It will also protect the patient, because all here are here to provide the safety and to provide performant medical devices for our patient. Your patient, it can be your mother, it can be your sister, it can be your children. So it's very important, if really you are not sure about the performance and the safety of your medical device, it is what it is, as we say. You have to conduct your clinical investigations, but there is a catch. There is a lot of tips and tricks where you can reduce the cost of your clinical investigations. And here, tell me.
So let's maybe just go, because I think it's really important here what you just said about cost, because I think there is the time consuming for doing this clinical investigation, but there is also the cost that is really kind of putting some kind of cold on this kind of project. So is it possible to disclose some kind of costs or average of cost for performing clinical investigation? Mainly, what is really the most important here? What will really increase the cost or reduce the cost? What is the thing that will be really time consuming, etc.? So can we just disclose that because then maybe let's go to how to minimize all this cost and thing. But first, can we get an average number here?
Yes, but As usual on medical device field, the answer it depends. It depends on several considerations, and especially the class and the risk of the medical device. Class 1 is not like class 3, and in term of time, in term of budget. But it's difficult to estimate without giving a class and some hints
Yeah, yeah.
from the medical device. But I will try. Yeah, I will try to give an estimations around that. So there is what we call in clinical investigation budget breakdown and budget planifications, and there is some important steps or parts that will consume a lot of money. So
Okay.
there is the first one, what we call the step up and the planning. Almost it costs 100,000 euro.
Okay.
So regulatory costs around 50,000. So data management around 80,000. Statistics also. I emphasize it really depends, but I tried to make the assumption from class 2A to B like that. So
Okay.
monitoring, it will be the most expensive part, because you will have to have a person that will be in places in several hospitals. It depends also, it's multicentric or unicentric, but the cost is around 350,000. And medical writing, it will be around 40,000. Project management also about 300, and there is other costs about 100. So approximately for clinical trial, it's around 1 million
Okay.
to really create a clinical trial. As I said, it really depends. And also there is a lot of tips and tricks to reduce this cost. It depends also on the country where you are. US, it's not like Europe. We understand that MDR make it hard to put a medical device on the market, but when you have to conduct clinical investigations, the costs in the US are not like the costs in Europe. The costs, especially if you are in France, there is a lot of tips and also paths that you can choose to reduce dramatically your costs.
So if I want to go, for example, to the European market with MDR, can I go to a country like Brazil, for example, to do my clinical investigation, maybe to reduce cost or to do things? So is there a restriction in terms of where I should do my clinical investigation, or can I do it wherever I want?
No, there is a restriction. Your clinical investigation must be conducted under 14155,
Yeah.
GSCP. Also, one of the most important thing is that your patient population, what we call sample size in clinical investigation language, must be comparable to the European population. So there is a lot of consideration to take. So as if you conduct clinical investigation in Europe and you would like to use it for the US market, there is also some consideration to have. Ethnicity also. So it's case per case. We cannot, sometimes we can, sometimes we cannot. It's depend on your clinical investigations plan.
So you have really to debunk all those kind of differences to explain that yes, what I'm doing in a certain country is equivalent to what I'm doing in Europe or whatever. I had a case, for example, where a manufacturer was doing a clinical investigation in Europe, and then he wanted to use that for the US market, but the FDA refused that because they said yes, but your healthcare system in Europe was different for this kind of disease, was different than the healthcare system in the US. Like in Europe, it's like ambulatory, so after one day you can get out. But in the US, the protocol is that you have to stay 3 days on observation, etc., monitoring. So as there is a difference here on the way that it's done, so maybe it will not be equivalent. So this kind of thing. So yeah, there are multiple consideration and multiple elements to review before you can get access. But if it's the same healthcare system, the same kind of demographic, the same kind of way of talking or whatever, communication, etc. So at the end, we can justify that I can go to Brazil and do a test for us, a product that will go to US because the population is the same or the type of disease is the same, etc. So this is mainly a justification that you have to provide.
Exactly, yes. And I also told you, you have to do really deep research, let's say search to prove and justify by article and be scientific one by one, go one by one. And what I recommend also, and what I recommend for 100% of my clients that are in Europe and would like to go to US, do your pre-sub,
Yeah.
Q-sub.
I mean,
Do it first. Ask your question. It's not like Europe. You can ask question, you can have the answer, and you can know already if your clinical investigation will be accepted before conducted it in Europe. So
exactly.
you do it, yeah, do it before going there and before conducting your clinical investigation.
Exactly, because yeah, I'm always advising that the chance we have in the US is that you can go to do a pre-sub, a Q submission, so mainly, and ask questions about what you are planning to do, your strategy, and then they can really tell you yes, it's good or no, it's bad. So then you know that before. And I have, yeah, it's the problem. Also, we have a lot of customers that do that at the end when they have nearly finished everything, which is not really worthy because at the end they will tell you maybe that you are wrong, so that you have to redo everything again from the beginning. So it's mainly a big issue.
And
Um,
this is yeah, and this is why I always say do your state of the art, enhanced state of the art, get your market access strategy, regulatory strategy, clinical strategy, and your financial strategy. When you have this, you will know in advance that you're gonna sell in Europe or in US, Europe then US, US then Europe, and then you can create really your clinical investigation if needed, if not, and you will have a clear view roadmap for you and for your also co-founder or also employee.
so any other way to minimize clinical investigation?
So the other best practices for clinical investigation is to look for what we call the submission. So here in France, so it's like a grant. There is a lot of grants, especially in Europe,
Yeah.
and in France that we called forfait innovation. So for example, in France, you will be able to cover the cost of your medical device that will be used in your clinical investigations. So if you have really a very expensive medical device like implantable and you use it, you will have also the costs covered by your by the subvention by the grant that you will get from the government, French government.
Yeah.
Uh,
And
one
it's not
other
only in France, so there is also grants in the UK, in the other
yeah,
countries. So you have really
of course.
to investigate the grants maybe that are offered by the some governments, and this can help you yet to choose also where you will do your clinical investigation. Also, yeah.
Yeah. And the last one that I always recommend is know what you are looking for. Primary outcome, secondary and or other secondary outcome. You have to know what you are looking for. If you conduct clinical investigation without knowing for what you are looking for, trying just getting a primary outcome because you are a researcher or because you would like this to use this in your marketing strategy, and it's not needed for clinical evaluation to prove the safety, you will be conducting clinical investigation for nothing. So you have to know what's your gaps in clinical data, and using the most important one, safety. For example, if you have a problem in safety, use it as your primary outcome. So create your plan, clinical investigation plan, from the results of your clinical evaluation or from the experts that told you we need this to create our clinical evaluation report.
So I suppose here, yeah, you have also some cases where you are starting to do your clinical evaluation. You find some literatures about your device, you find some equivalency, etc. But as you have multiple claims, maybe you are covering 80% of the claims and then 20% are not covered. And then you can use the clinical investigation just for those 20% and not not do clinical investigation for everything. So the claims are also something that we can play on to reduce the claims to then avoid or reduce the clinical investigation, because I know that We had that this situation with transition between MDD to MDR. We have some manufacturers, when you go to their website, they have 20 claims for their products. We can do this, we can do that, etc. And when we start to ask for clinical data about those claims, we have nearly no clinical data for any of those. And then when we say, oh, if we want, we can do a clinical investigation, and then we go to the 20 claims, and it will cost like not 1 million, but maybe 20 million, because you have to prove everything. And at the end, they start to reduce. Say, okay, let's remove that, let's remove that, let's remove that, and then they keep the real important ones that can be used at the end. So is the claims also a strategy to say, okay, let's maybe it's better to reduce than to keep it up, keep it bigger?
100%. Go back also to the state of the art and your clinical evaluation plan when you are gonna define your claims. It's much more better and easier to reduce your claim, over deliver, and then you do your PMCF study to enlarge the scope and have other claims as you are already on the market. From marketing perspective, it's better. From regulatory perspective, from safety perspective, performance, all the angles, it will be better to reduce your claim, get the most important thing, the must-have, so as I explained, and prove them with clinical data. If they are available without clinical investigation, while you are doing your clinical investigation and you have already the needed data, do your CE marking, get approval, and then if you would like to get other claims or include other claims, do the post-market clinical investigations, and then you will add them. It will be also easier for the notified body and for you to accept them.
Exactly, yeah. So I think, yeah, staged clinical exercise is really important here also, to as it's just in case you want to reduce cost and reduce timing. But if you have the budget, like we talk about corporate people, maybe, or companies, maybe they can do that at once. But yeah, for startups, as we said, starting small and increasing can be maybe a way also to help. And it's also helping, maybe I saw a company doing that for some IP, intellectual properties, to also keep his IP on, is to include more and more and more and more, so that it's always keeping up, and then people cannot then copy what he's doing, many about that also. So this is also a strategy. Okay, so I think we covered mainly all what we wanted to talk about. So yeah, just as a reminder, people are trying to avoid clinical investigation because of timing and because of costing, of budget. And here, what we just discussed today is mainly about how we can try to minimize or avoid to do a clinical investigation. But as Hatem said, there are a lot of cases where it's not possible at all. I had one case of a company that was located in the US that were selling their devices since 20 years. It was, I think, a stimulation of a diaphragm, so the muscle in the middle, between the lung and the stomach. So mainly they were selling that since 20 years. Everything was fine. And when they had to move from MDD to MDR, it was a nightmare, because for them, they had no clinical data at all.
At all.
So
Okay.
20 years of selling the device, 20 years with no complaints, no issue, etc. But they never had the clinical data done or collected data from the device they were using. And now at the end, they say, okay, let's give up with Europe. Let's stay in the US and sell in the US. So you see, this is also a thing where you have, please collect clinical data while you are using the device, like PMCF, like Hatem said, so that you can continue to then place your device on the market, because you have proofs that it's working, and it's like that. But I think, yeah, there are a lot of stories like that. Maybe you have a lot of also like that attempt, but yeah, it's a reality. Clinical data is one of the, I don't know if you agree about that, but maybe it's one of the elements that is really critical for MDR. So if you don't have clinical data, you can forget MDR completely.
100% agree. Yes, 100%. And to make it structured for our listener, first, what I always emphasize, do your state of the art as soon as possible, even when you just started the creation of your medical device. Then create your strategies: regulatory strategy, market access strategy, and regulatory strategy, clinical strategy, and you will know where to go and how you're gonna go to the market. And then you have to create your clinical evaluation process, as we said. So it's a process, it's not a report. Process. Know what clinical data you should have, what clinical data the competitor have, what we should prove, So you will have an understanding of your medical background and your medical device competitor and scope. And then if you need clinical investigation, there is, as we explained, if you are class 2B or 3, there is some cases where you can avoid them. If you are class 1, 2A, and 2B non-implantable, you can choose the equivalent without having the need to sign a contract with your equivalent device, but you have to prove your sufficient evidence, your sufficient clinical data, and access to sufficient clinical data, or 6110. There is big conditions than that. We may talk about it in another podcast.
Exactly.
Yeah. Or if all those cases are not included, you have to do clinical investigation. As I explained, if really there is no other way only to do clinical investigations, it's security for you as a manufacturer, for your patient. It might be your mother, your father, it might be your children. So if it's needed, it's needed, but there is some tricks and tips. You can reduce the costs of clinical investigation and go fast. Contact experts, contact the people that are doing this every day. You will earn 10x your investment.
Exactly, yeah. So, then good transition. So, why people should contact you then if they need that, so to get some support?
Yeah. So if you are creating a medical device and you'd like to have a state of the art or clinical strategy, or you are asking about, should I have clinical investigation? Should I have to conduct a post-market clinical investigation? Yes or no? I'm very active on LinkedIn. You can just DM me on LinkedIn and I will answer with pleasure.
Exactly. I will put anyway your LinkedIn page on the show notes, so you can just go there and contact Hatem. So yeah, so as Hatem said, so mainly this can avoid you to have some issues at the end. So be proactive, contact experts at the beginning, ask them to get you some support to make some. I call that the diagnostic phase, like to do a diagnostic at the beginning, and then you can know what is the treatment, if I can say, for your dossier, and know exactly what should be planned so that you are successful at the end. So don't hesitate to look at that. Okay, Hatem, it was really a pleasure. I hope it will help a lot of people. So yeah, for people that are listening, don't hesitate to also put some questions on the LinkedIn comments. So Hatem will be happy to answer that. And if you want, also go to the LinkedIn page of Hatem, and then you can directly contact him, follow him, and follow him also, because he has a lot of posts also, which is great content. Okay, Hatem, it was really a pleasure. Thank you very much, and I wish you a nice day.
Thank you, Munir. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.